Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jill Snyder, museum consultant to EXPO Chicago, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you to Dialogues, presented in partnership with the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. Dialogues offers panel discussions, conversations, and engaging discourse with leading artists, curators, designers, and art professionals on current issues. EXPO Chicago is proud to present the annual Directors Summit, a program that invites a diverse group of emerging art museum leaders from across the United States for a 3-day program addressing the shifting dynamics of museum leadership today. The Directors Summit is centered on 2 public roundtables on the dialogue stage. A special thank you to our partners, Sotheby's, Bloomberg Connects, the Terra Foundation for American Art, and the University Club of Chicago. It's a really great honor to grow this program, now in its 3rd year, and by placing focus on an emerging generation of museum leaders, the Directors Summit looks forward with hope. Each of these directors has been in his or her position for under 3 years. They are rising in a moment of urgency, yet are playing the long game necessary for structural change. By design, the roundtables bring into the public realm conversations that require a refreshing measure of candor and vulnerability, which centers us in our shared humanity. We will hear today, as we did yesterday's public roundtable, about their inspiring, creative, and entrepreneurial initiatives centered on a more equitable future. Given our constraint to 1 short hour, I've asked each director to share an initiative that reflects their vision. And I just want to say, we just listened to a keynote lecture today which talked about the difference between theory and praxis. And I was struck by that the intent of this, by focusing on an initiative, is seeing how a lot of these ideas about change in museums are being implemented through hyper-local specific initiatives. And following their presentations, I'll moderate a conversation among them, and we will preserve some time at the end for your questions. So please allow me to introduce our 3 panelists, and I will acknowledge that change from our initial program, which is, unfortunately, Azman Naim, the director at the Baltimore Museum of Art, fell ill and wasn't able to join us today. So we wish her well in recovery. So I have Brooke Minto, executive director and CEO at the Columbus Museum of Art, Reuben Roqueñi, executive director at the Portland Institute for Contemporary Art, welcome, and Yasufumi Nakamori, who is the museum director and vice president of art and culture at the Asia Society. Welcome, Yasu. So we're going to begin just in that order, and Brooke, if you'd like to kick it off.
Sure. Thank you, Jill, so much for bringing us together. I was a guest here last year and got to hear from a number of colleagues, now colleagues in the field, on incredible projects. I was, at the time, about 1 month away from beginning my tenure in Columbus. I've now been there 11 months, and it's really wonderful to be able to share this initiative, but also to engage the audience as well as my new colleagues here in a conversation about what's next for CMA. And so it's my pleasure to share this project. When I landed at CMA in May of last year, I had an incredible opportunity and challenge to think about the next chapter for our secondary and satellite space. I'll tell you a bit about the museum in just a second, but this space is called CMA at the Pizzuti. And in tackling this opportunity and challenge, I engaged many stakeholders. It's something that's still on the go at the museum, but a conversation that I've been having for the last several months with not only our staff, our board, but also a number of people around our community. A little bit about the Columbus Museum of Art. You'll see 2 very different images on the screen. On the top is a wonderful expansion to our building that was completed in 2015. The museum did a wonderful new renovation that added over 50,000 square feet of space to the building, about 16,000 of which is exhibition space. On the bottom, you'll see our 1931 historical structure. The museum's 145 years old, and the historical structure, which is facing Broad Street, a main street in downtown Columbus, houses the majority of our collection, which highlights American art, European art, folk art, photography, decorative arts. And so we have this contrast of architecture and quite a lot of generous space, which is something we just heard a panel talking about, to showcase the collection as well as changing exhibitions. This image is of CMA the Pizzuti, a space that is about 20,000 square feet that sits about 5 to 10 minutes north of downtown Columbus in a district called the Short North Arts and Entertainment District. In 2019, we had the great fortune of receiving this space as a gift to the institution. It was established in 2011 by a collecting family in Columbus, the Pizzuti family, that has a wonderful collection of post-war and contemporary art, over 3,000 works of art in their private collection. And for 6 years, they ran this space with changing exhibitions and a robust program of public initiatives and talks and dialogues. And it really became a center of gravity for the Short North Arts District. In 2019, CMA took ownership of this building and was really building momentum for it as the pandemic then struck. This slide, because I'm a data junkie, and I'm sure there's some others in the room here too, shows us a little bit about visitor numbers. So from 2012 to until the pandemic, the visitation was pretty robust in this space. And our hope in taking over the space was that we could scale it even further and really increase visibility for the programs that were happening in the museum, but also create a new outlet for audiences and audience development for CMA on Broad Street in downtown Columbus. Of course, 2020 happened as it did. We closed this space as many institutions did across the country, and I say we, my predecessors. I arrived just May of last year. But it was closed for much of 2020, 21, and 22. And then when I landed in the spring, I had the opportunity to sort of bring it back online, think about its future, and how do we sort of redefine this space with all of the new dynamics sort of in our community and culture now. In getting started with this project, which is, as I said, still on the go, we partnered with the Business Development District around the Short North to see who really is the audience in this community. It's a district that's been developed over the last several decades in Columbus and has changed demographically. But we wanted to know who's the audience today. So what did we learn? We learned that there's about 2,000 people who live in this arts and entertainment district full time. They are mostly millennials, 25 to 35. They are more highly educated and earning more than the average in our county and our region. And so we have this sense that, you know, they are not only phenomenal art-seeking, experience-seeking individuals, but they are also folks we'd like to cultivate over the long term as supporters and future leaders of the Art Museum. We then did a comparative study. As we reopened the Pizzuti with some soft programming, we did visitor analysis, and then we did the same on Broad Street to understand who goes to this building and how do they differ from our audiences at CMA. You know, what can this building offer us that our main location cannot? What we learned is that the visitors there are much younger, as I mentioned. They're much more diverse. The community that visits the Pizzuti building versus our space on Broad Street are much more diverse by ethnicity. There are far more students, university-age students, that visit this space. It has some proximity to OSU University, which we don't have on Broad Street. They're mostly single and sort of pre-family. And we also get far more tourists to this building, which exists, as I said, right near our convention center and more kind of tourism-driven venues in the city. So as I landed, I thought, well, how do we engage new audiences? I'm new to this community. I'm learning from all of those who helped to onboard me, the way in which it's evolved, the Short North versus downtown, the trends and so forth. And I thought, as I think about all the opportunity and potential for this building to explore experimental projects, to develop really kind of critical conversations around contemporary art. I wanted more people in the conversation. So in doing that, we established a task force, as I think many museums do. It included a subset of our board of directors, folks who were involved in the so-called merger of the two spaces in 2019, who understood the history and the genesis of the project at its inception. We also brought in community stakeholders who had been engaged in public programming in the space. And we had a subset of our staff who had not only worked on the space in 2019, but who had understood the difficulties through the pandemic and reopening in 2022. As we think about, how we build an ambitious program in this museum and in this second space, something completely, comes to mind, and I think it's something we'll talk about with all of us. How do we create a financial plan for this institution? How do we grow an audience there with a really ambitious program? And how do we sustain that over time? We've got a main institution, a 15,000 object collection, and now this second space that's a tremendous opportunity, but one that we've got to think about in a responsible way over longevity. So these are the questions that we're thinking about now that I'm eager to discuss with all of you, and that I'm curious to hear more from our audience about. Thank you.
Thank you, Brooke. And thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you, Jill and Kate and Megan and Alexandra for being so amazing with the administration of this program. Thanks to the Sotheby's people in the room, the Bloomberg people in the room, and amongst many other partners. Anyways, I'm not here. I'm a director, and I'm not necessarily supposed to be doing this part of it for everybody else, but I do want to thank the supporters of the program and for bringing us all out here, and myself in particular. First slide. My name is Reuben Roqueñi. I'm the fairly new executive director at the Portland Institute for Contemporary Art, otherwise known as PICA. I've been in my position now for 10 months, and I'm joined here by one of our artistic director and curator for visual art at the institution. This is an example of what the inside of our space looks like. It's a facility that's about 20,000 square feet. It's a very simple four-walled warehouse space at the very edge of a historically black neighborhood. It is a very adaptable space, which I'll get to here in a second. It also is accompanied by a small black box theater, which is annexed onto the building in the back. We have residential neighbors right on the back half of, on the other side of the street, on the back side of our building. We have very serious concerns about noise at times, including right now with a very subsonic kind of piece in the annex. And so we're very aware of where we're at and where we sit in terms of history and in terms of our current location. So coming out of the pandemic, I would say that we are an institution that is non-collecting. We are known in many ways for our performing arts programming, along with our exhibition and installation. But what we've heard, and we've struggled like everybody else to try to bring audiences back in the door, to have people re-engage with the arts in general and with our space in particular. Some of the lessons coming out of the pandemic were that artists were telling us exactly what they need. We need to be better taken care of is what they were telling us, essentially. We need care for ourselves as whole people, and not just as agents for entertainment or for conversation. And in that, we've really considered the way that we establish and maintain our relationships to artists and that kind of, with that kind of ethic, meaning that we prefer to engage with them over a long period of time in a deeper way, more familial, more personal. The speed of trust is a term that's been going around of late. these are some of the values inside of that. Part of that is a very deeply collaborative experience for them and with us. Again, the longevity of the work that we're doing with them and a sense of empowerment for them to come in and use the space in whatever way they need to. We're primarily known for a festival that features performing arts, an exhibition called Time-Based Art, or TBA for short. 2022 was the 22nd year of that. Christy Edmonds, who was on the stage prior to me, was the founding director. There was another director after her that was at the institution for over 20 years, and I'm just the third of the directors in what will be our 30th year next year. This festival was started as an itinerant kind of experience for the community. We partnered with multiple organizations across the city, theaters, other kinds of art spaces to bring the artists to the community, and people were running around the city to attend all the events at the festival, similar to what we're experiencing here at EXPO. Generally, the festivals happened over a very condensed period of time. Shortened out to 10 days is what this format has been over the last 5 years or so. There was always a kind of headquarters for the festival where people would come to find experiences with each other, late night programming, food, things to drink. And we'd host folks, of course, from the region and the local community, but people would come from across the country and then from outer national destinations. It's our flagship program, to be sure. This is a photo here of one of the artists that performed, Elisa Harkins, who's a native artist from Oklahoma. So moving into last year when I first came on, the idea that I landed into was that we weren't going to do the festival. Oh no, who are we then? So part of it was out of need for sure, with the leadership transition, our finances, the particular space that we were in at the time that was, for many reasons. But what we really didn't want to lose was the momentum of the festival. And so one of the charges that I took coming on was to try to reconsider how do we maintain our branding, so to speak? How do we maintain the tradition of this festival in our community that had grown to expect this experience every fall? While we were in this time of reflection and thinking about what change meant in our institution. And so for us, it was really a serious consideration of who we are as an institution, and then really a risk for us to take in not presenting a festival. So the experiment then was, how do we then couch our seasonal work where we had a lot of artists that we were presenting in the fall and the winter. How then do we present this to the community in a way that they can grasp and that they can still find some correlation to their previous work? And so with some of our heads came together, and the marketing and the communications team, we moved from time-based for a year to time-released. And so the festival then looked something more like an experience that would happen not just over the course of 10 days, but would happen over the course of several months. It allowed for us to engage our audiences in a more long-term way, to be sure, allow for them to plan to be there, to be able to find babysitters and take the time off that they needed, to plan their calendars accordingly. And likewise, it allowed for us to be able to interact with the artists that we worked with in a much deeper way over a longer period of time. So I'm not sure if this is an initiative per se. I think it was more like a response to a need, a response to an ecology that we found ourselves in. I mean, the rebranding, I think some of us liked it. Some of us kind of maybe didn't. What is this? Why not just not call it anything? Or, so for better or worse, what it turned out to be was an experiment. This is just an example of some of the artists who came through. Will Rawls is an African-American artist now living in New York. He's an artist that we've been working with for a number of years. You can get a sense of the scope of the space and the picture on the right, which was part of an exhibition that was installed. He was working on this exhibition, actually developing it in-house up until the very last second, and even during the course of the exhibition where he was changing out video and whatnot. Also a performance piece associated with that, and I'm going to rush through some of these slides here, but what that allowed for us to do is to be very curatorially responsive to his work and to help him to develop the work on site. He's turned around and said to us, Pika's my creative home. Another example of one of the projects that came through during Time Released is a performance piece by Andrew Tay and Stephen Thompson, Make Banana Cry, a response to the popular views of Asian culture within the Western mainstream. It was a fashion show. We were able to set up a full-on fashion experience for the audience with a ramp and people seated around the artists in a particular way. You'll see the plastic bags on people's feet there, so they wouldn't bring dirt on the runway there, which made for an interesting experience for the audience. Again, we worked with the artists over a long period of time. We had them in-house for a long period. They told us that they had never had that kind of experience with an institution before. So again, what we experienced with the artists were these much deeper experiences. The artistic directors were literally in the kitchen from morning till night, making meals for the artists. For the whole company, we took care of them, picked them up at the airport, made sure they were taken care of in any way. They never had to leave the house. We got to know them much better. Kristen keeps an apron in the kitchen, and she wears it all the time. And so we moved away from this notion of institution to a notion that we're really just a place for people to be, a home. And we presented about the same amount of work that we would have done normally within the scope of a festival. What was the audience response? We did do some surveying. I don't have the math here, but what they did tell us is that it was more accessible for them, that they were able to relax into the scope of the program, almost done, and appreciated our attempt to try to redefine the festival. What they also told us was that they really missed TBA. We are bringing it back this year. Thank you for going through this experiment with us. They really missed the energy of the festival and the opportunity to engage with each other. They missed having fun, really. Not that the season wasn't fun, but it's a whole different experience when people are able to be together in a very concentrated way. So TBA 24, like I said, is going to be a more condensed, still over the course of some time. We took that learning experience from it. We're going to keep PICA as a festival kind of hub, offer those opportunities for folks to participate late night, to engage in food activities, things to drink, and that kind of thing, a place to party. Just to push a little bit of the work that we have in-house now. Our work is built around social change, and people expect our experimentation and our outspokenness. We do not hide it, so this is a good example of the kind of work that we do. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'm listening to you, and there's a nice connection. You know, the CMA being an encyclopedic art museum, PICA as a primarily space for performing art. We have both of them in a way, but in a very kind of focused fashion at the Asia Society in New York. So Asia Society is actually a 16-location institution worldwide, headquartered in New York. We have 3 museums, one in New York, one in Houston, Texas, and the other in Hong Kong. And as a vice president of arts and culture, so my role is to make sure there's a wonderful alliance, actually, among all of the sites while running a New York City museum. Coming from a large British National Museum, where I was a senior curator. So taking this role 7 months ago, my life changed dramatically. You know, it's really like a 24/7 task to be a director, and I found actually more than like 100 tasks. You know, I need to do something. You know, ranging, you know, from assembling my own team to fundraising for, you know, for next 5 years. But the purpose of Asia Society is to, you know, investigate and identify the shared future between Asia and the rest of the world. And this was actually started by John D. Rockefeller III in 1956. So we were started as actually Rockefeller family, you know, project. There are 3 pillars in the organization: art and culture, education, and policy. So for the last 10 years or so, we have become known as a think tank in terms of US-China relationship. We do have a small but a preeminent collection of pre-1900 Asian art, plus you know, maybe 100 modern contemporary Chinese art, Asian and also Asian diaspora art in our storage sites. So we have 3 pillars, and arts and culture has been, you know, the space where soft power of arts and culture has been really the, you know, motivating and also driving force for the organization. However, that changed a little bit in the last 10 years when our previous president was really a scholar of you know, China policy. So now with a new president who just arrived last week, as a matter of fact, how we can bring this kind of power, soft power of arts and culture back to the organizations. So the mission for the museum itself is really to celebrate Asian and Asian diaspora art, and also embracing, you know, artist risk-taking. I talk about actually Asian and Asian diaspora art in a you know, most diverse and also extended way. When in my previous post, you know, when I was in South Africa, for example, you know, I find this, you know, pocket of South Asian, you know, population in Cape Town, or the, you know, South Asian artists in, you know, England. You know, how can we embrace those diasporic Asian artists into the program, while, you know, looking at a history of Asian art, particularly pre-1900. So I take this as a wonderful scholarly, you know, project where we have to invent a new methodology to talk about Asia and also Asian art and culture. Asia Society was really seen as, you know, kind of elite institution located in the Upper East Side. You know, as a matter of fact, you know, I took a survey, visitor survey for the past year, and almost 84% of audience are adults. And then among the 85%, 14, 15 are senior citizens. You know, really white audience. We don't have enough young, diverse people as audience. So how can I, you know, increase the percentage of young audience to 25% from, you know, 15%? We don't want to lose actually, you know, adult audience too. So that means I need to actually really increase the entire visitor population to bring actually younger people to the gallery. So there are 5 priorities I've identified in my last 7 months. Increase the visibility, diversify and multiply audiences, meaning really kind of how can we bring younger people into the gallery, partner with other New York City institutions, connect actually within the Asia Society, then of course fundraising part. In New York City, we were the actually leader in 1990s and also early 21st century, creating exhibitions like Inside Out, New Chinese Art, 80s and 90s, 1999 exhibition. that's really the first exhibition showcasing Chinese art from the 80s and 90s in America. Yoshitomo Nara, his survey show, first show in America took place in Asia Society as well. So we need to bring those, curatorial rigor and also, a density back to Asia Society Museum. So along, those various, projects, I'm identifying, we've identified that we have a wonderful neighbor, only 1 block and half south of us, called Hunter College. Hunter College is a flagship college campus of CUNY, City University of New York. I myself actually have a master's degree in art history from Hunter. I see, my colleague from Hunter here as well. So how can we bring Hunter students into our galleries? We do, provide free admission to Hunter students as well as Columbia students, but still, they don't come to see the shows. So they also have a very active art and art history program as well. We are just not known in the student population. And Hunter, which has like 23,000 students, and actually 80% of the students are minorities. I believe actually if you combine Latino and Asian American students, at Hunter College, they are the majority of the student population. So how can we bring them? So this is actually one of my short-term projects, and I think I've accomplished some in last 6 months. I was able to actually, have a couple of meetings with the Hunter Art History faculties. We had actually Hunter Faculty Night 2 weeks ago, and as a result, 2 of the art history professors, for the first time, they began using our objects into their curricula. And then we now have actually undergraduate and graduate, internship and also fellowship program, with the Hunter students. So we wanted to be a cultural hub for Hunter students. I want actually students to hang out in our cafe and also come to see our shows. So we are now kind of assembling, young people committee, including some Hunter students. We will do a number of listening sessions just to hear what they want to see, what they want to hear, how they want to participate in the museum practice. So I think this is one of the few things I've accomplished so far in my first 6 months into the directorship. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me just offer a couple observations. The 3 of you are very distinctly different institutions. Brooke, you have an institution that serves as a civic hub for city. Reuben, you have this very artist-centric institution that leads with experimentation. And Yasu, your museum is kind of part of a global network that is, but with a location in a specific location in New York City. So very different, and you each have different initiatives. But one thing that sort of strikes me coming up, there's an overarching theme here of time. I think about this a lot. Time in terms of time as a resource, right? And you talk about the speed of trust. You talk about working 24/7 as a museum director. You talk about the need to, you have the urgency of figuring out what to do with this satellite space, but at the same time, you kind of have to understand who your audience is. I am struck, just in my own experience, this idea of when do you speed up, when do you slow down, what's the nature of sequencing? So time as a resource becomes, I think, something that is very tangible, and I think it particularly as a real challenge for a director. Moving fast, moving slow, and and then you have this issue of you slow down your program, to have, and I love Time Released, it's a great title. And, so you kind of had a different approach to sequencing, but in a way there was this desire for it to be intense and concentrated. So can you talk a little bit more about how do you think about time as a resource and sequencing your own self, like on every level, your own self, your community, your resources? Go with it.
For me, the process of gathering together this group of stakeholders, this task force around the Pizzuti project, is what allowed us to extend time. I landed, there was a sense of urgency and immediacy to decision making, which I knew wasn't going to be possible in short order. But bringing everyone into the conversation allowed them to understand the complexity of what we were doing and to really slow things down. It allowed us to do a project that I was thinking of, as you mentioned, the partnership with Hunter. In the fall, in September, we opened what is the last exhibition that we had in this space. It ran from September through February in partnership with an art historian from the Ohio State University who's a post-war and contemporary art historian. And she developed a really substantial project with 2 graduate students, so advanced sort of art historians thinking about future curatorial careers. And it allowed them this space for experimentation to develop a really wonderful project with a mid-career artist, Sarah Rosalina, from Los Angeles. They wrote a publication, they did a full show, it got reviewed in the New York Times. And I say this to say, by slowing down our decision-making process, allowing this partnership to bring to fruition a really wonderful exhibition, serious exhibition with an established artist, people started to think more about the possibility of the space, the kind of experiments we could have there, the kinds of collaboration with university students we could create. And I don't know if we hadn't created this committee if that would have happened. So we did a pop-up exhibition. We're now, thinking more about what those kinds of collaborations could look like, and that's allowed us to take more time. At the same time, now that we're thinking about audience, and we understand the university students that come into the space, the tourists that come into the space, it helps us also to think about the curatorial complement that we'll need as an institution going forward. I'm the successor of a director who was in the museum for 40 years total, but 20 years as director. And there were a number of retirements before I arrived. So we now have the opportunity to bring on curators who can revision this space, who can establish these relationships and continue with this experimental project that the committee was allowed to sort of witness and be part of the success of. And so I say that the process of discussing with stakeholders over some time allowed us to slow things down and really get everyone to understand that there's more to unpack here.
What about you, Reuben? When do you go fast? When do you go slow?
Yeah, just that word, I just feel like I need to wax poetic or something, but I was thinking about speed of trust versus like the speed of capitalism and the urgency of our times, maybe. I remember I was presenting a project that we needed approval for with the tribal council, and they tabled it because they were going at the pace that they went at. And I needed them to approve it at that meeting because the grant application was due the following week, and I couldn't wait till the next month. And Becky Ponder said to me, we were here before Tucson was even thought of, and we're going to be here after Tucson is gone. So just relax. It'll happen. If it's not with this, it'll happen at some point. So here I go into the waxing part. But it's a challenge to find the time to slow down and the time to speed up. I think what's important in terms of my role is to move at that pace of capitalism. That's my job. My job is to allow for the room for the artists and our artistic directors and artistic staff to move at the pace that they need to move at. And so there's a balance inside of that for sure. I couldn't give you a direct answer about when to slow down and speed up, but certainly there are different paces at which we need to work.
That's really interesting. The 2 different paces you have to work fast in order for other things to evolve and in their own proper time. What about you, Yasu?
Well, I agree with both of you on your struggle and also sort of like adaptation to the different times. Depend on the different tasks. But then what I care most about is actually how can we slow our visitor down? How can we provide actually the space where there's a different kind of time is existing, particularly when they are looking at the object. So, kind of expanded, extended time. How can we create such a magical space, when they are, immersed in our gallery space? And then how can we, well, there are two projects, we are taking on, mid to long term. One is Indigenous Asia project. So when we talk about actually, various indigeneity, their sense of time is maybe different from the way, we feel, we experience the time. How can we also think about actually a subject from, the other side? I think time is a very element, in certain thematic subject matters of research, obviously. So there's a lot to think. But I guess what I need is I need more time to fundraise for project we want to do.
True. Yeah.
This seems to be a theme that comes up in every panel. Everyone needs more money in
Money
order to
and time.
money and time, both really critical resources. I want to reflect on one other big topic, and then I want to open up to questions to the audience. And that is, all of you are talking, and really the theme of this whole Director Summit is change, right? And change is an adaptive process. And, I think one of the most influential theorists for me was Leo Steinberg, who wrote about new art and how you expect of your audiences to take a leap of faith to embrace something new without knowing what the reward is, but you have to give something up, right? So the nature of adaptation to something new means something has to be released or, sort of left behind. And so I'm in reflecting on that of your embrace of new communities, looking at bringing in your Short North community, or you're bringing in Hunter students, or you're wanting to be more artist-centric. It's not seamless, right? So what has to give? What changes? What adaptations do you face when when certain resources have to now be focused on the Hunter students, or they come in the galleries? Does that shift dynamics, to have more noisy students? Or what dynamics happen when you have a younger crowd who want to be more social? Or what happens when you have artists who want to be more experimental? So I'm curious to know, what's happening that you have to respond to, that adaptation? Is that too broad of a question?
No, I just want my answer. The answer I want to be is I want to give up nothing.
You can't have it all.
I know. It's just a tough one. I imagine that we can grow and scale, and it may not be the most realistic, but I would love for us to have it all and to be able to build a team that can support both sites, plan very ambitiously in terms of exhibitions and programs, and grow the audience. I'd love to not give up anything. May not be realistic, but I don't know. What do you think about that?
As I was thinking about that, I was thinking about this kind of question. I think that is hits home for most of the institutions that are in this room, and everywhere. But just the role of our institution within the Portland community, within the greater arts ecology, the role of contemporary and innovative arts practice inside of that space, particularly in a time when we have what can seem like much graver concerns. And we're seeing that in terms of the way that audiences are responding to the work and the way that the funding community is sort of turning in on itself, the way that donors are thinking about the way that they approach our work, and the work of the arts in general. It's in constant flux. I've seen that over the course of my career, to be sure, the different priorities that people are taking in their lives. But as I consider PICA and thinking about bringing new people into this space, it's really asking them to take that leap that you're talking about, to come and participate in what is an experiment for the artist, what is an experiment for us, not just on the sort of physical plane, but in terms of the way that we think and look at the world. And as I mentioned earlier, we're in a historically black neighborhood, for example. We're beginning to really start to think about what the role of our institution is inside of that space. How do we begin to reflect the way that the community operates within Portland, inside of the space of our four walls? We've done pretty well to bring in black artists into our space. We do really well with that, and we house a black artist collective in the space. But what I've also heard is that folks aren't seeing themselves inside of that. The hyper-local community is not seeing themselves inside of that. And so some of the risk-taking that we're doing, which takes time, doesn't happen overnight, is to build those relationships so that we can start to be more reflective of the place that we're in and have I guess a firmer identity around that, because we don't right now. Those relationships take time. I am very well cognizant of that and have been witness to that, particularly in BIPOC communities that don't have very much trust for institutions. So the most important thing is just to be there and to show up and not ask anything of people and make the spaces available as possible. All of that kind of ethic, but that's kind of where we're at in terms of the risk-taking. It's not necessarily around youth or the elderly. We have a great mix of we have a great demographic, a mix of a demographic that comes through the door. We're now starting to consider more how to refine that.
So I guess for me, how can we bring in new, much more diverse, complicated aspects of Asian diaspora art by letting go of some of the traditional aspect of Asian art in terms of programs, right? Because we have built the audience, to see, like a 13th century, South Asian bronze exhibition at the Asia Society or bamboo object exhibition, but we will do that in a small scale. However, we're gonna bring in new initiatives such as Afro-Asia, under which we are looking at the intersectionality between Africa and Asia. Artists and also techniques and materiality, they are traveling back and forth between two continents. Before 1900, that's one exhibition we are developing right now. For the collection rehang of traditional Asian art, starting 10 months from now, we are bringing 3 artists, 2 Asian American artists and 1 very senior African American artist. Her way of engaging Japanese and Indian visual culture is really astonishing. So who is going to be the driving seat to interpret it and present the new views on traditional Asian art? By doing so, I'm sure we'll get some critiques, right? So we want to actually, create the exhibition almost like going through theater. So here we go, another time element. How can we create a different kind of time in exhibition? That would be very different from the way we presented objects previously. By doing so, I'm sure we'll get some, criticism, but we are ready to take that. I think risk-taking is one of the most important values for us moving forward.
Thank you. Let's open it up to some questions from the audience.